v.h.s.x? What do you mean?
All right, let's get into the topic. Dead by Daylight has one of the most passionate communities in gaming, and also one of the most consistent. The same action can be toxic one day, just be playing around and trolling or whatever have you the next. The same way someone can use a tech on killer or a mechanic on killer, all of a sudden that's unfair. But if survivors are utilizing techs, glitches, and bugs that should not be in the game, magically now it's skill expression. And nowhere is this more obvious than in how the community talks about balance and how some of the biggest creators talk about it. Today, we're going to be talking about the double standards in the Dead by Daylight community and why so many big voices choose to sit on the fence. But let's set the stage here. It's not to call anybody out. It's not supposed to be an us versus them or anything like that, of course. We're simply just talking about just a topic that I've noticed. Let's start with the obvious truth. Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical game, so the community is asymmetrical too. Killers and survivors don't just play different roles, they're playing completely different games. And obviously, with that really being true, their perspectives are completely different. So if a killer is utilizing a strategy like tunneling, magically it's now toxic, sweaty, unfun. And on the other side of things, of course, if survivors decide to gen rush, it is considered optimal, efficient, and smart. If a killer decides to camp, whether it be end game or just mid game to secure an extra hook state, now it's magically no skill. And also survivors body blocking would be technically a strategy, albeit annoying, but a strategy, and it is considered teamwork. Right? And notice how all these things are constantly shifting and changing depending on who's asking and depending on who's talking about it. The same intent, the same outcome, but they have completely different moral judgments depending on who's doing it, who's saying it. And this is obviously not an accident. It is perspective bias. Now, one of the most damaging things that the DBD community does is to turn playstyles into moral issues. Suddenly, it's not about strategy anymore, it's about being a good person. Now, some examples of that you'll see all over the place, whether it be DBD forums, Reddit, Twitter, you name it. They'll say real killers aren't going to tunnel, right? I don't tunnel when I play. I don't need to tunnel when I play. I don't need to camp when I play. I don't need to do this when I play. And maybe some other people maybe agree with this. Good survivors don't need to use meta perks. So that might be interesting. That might be something to talk about. Another aspect you could say that you maybe see is if you do this thing, you're the problem with the game. If you decide to utilize a strategy like camping, tunneling, or slugging, oh, now you're the problem with the game. You're why people don't play. Right? Dead by Daylight ultimately is a competitive game pretending to be casual, and that creates guilt where there really shouldn't be any. You know, winning isn't immoral, efficiency is not evil, and playing to your win condition is not toxic. But let's talk about the topic at hand, the fence sitting, because this is where things get a bit uncomfortable. Most big Dead by Daylight creators know that these double standards exist. I mean, they've played long enough, they've seen the hypocrisy. But why don't they call it out? And it's probably because the fence sitting is safer. If you were to call out survivor bias, you risk losing a much larger audience. I mean, as you guys know, a large majority do play survivors. So if you even say anything that isn't exactly what they're saying, exactly what they're thinking, essentially echo chambering their perspective, you're going to lose out on a lot of people. And of course, trying to call out the killer bias to some extent. I mean, sure, that's like universal, I would say, but it is quite rare, at least from what I've seen. And of course, they also want to avoid stuff like strong opinions because they invite drama, dogpiling, and overall affects, their bottom line, of course. Because, obviously when your income depends on being liked, especially by both sides, neutrality becomes survival. Now, I want to preface it by saying that there's nothing wrong with being balanced, but there is a problem when both sides become a shield. So, some of those statements you may see around videos or other things like that, you'll say, oh, killers and survivors are both toxic, right? Everyone has it equally bad. Like, the game is actually pretty balanced, right? Like, when it comes down to toxicity, it's always both. They both can do it. And it's like, sure. And those statements sound reasonable, right? But they erase context. Because at the end of the day, there's a higher likelihood that a survivor player is going to be toxic than there simply is going to be killers, because there's one killer per match versus 4 survivors per game. So you have at least 4 times as likely to have a bad apple in the bunch than it is to have one single killer that does something you don't like and becomes toxic or whatever. And the bigger issue with that obviously comes down to there's a lack of accountability that goes on to that. And anybody who's been around the channel, or at least has engaged with the DVD community, has seen a lot of these people that like to sit on the fence when talking about these issues, and then those same people don't hold those others accountable when they step out of line and do something that really should be considered toxic and really should be considered a bad thing. And inevitably that leads to what, right? It still ends up leaning to a side, which is ridiculous, right? Doesn't it defeat the purpose of sitting on the fence? Now, when creators refuse to take a stance, the burden falls on those players who already feel unheard. So we're talking like high MMR killer mains, solo queue survivors, and the players stuck between casual and competitive. And these players in particular really don't need the validation, but they need the honesty, right? And when the biggest voices won't say what they see, the conversation stagnates. Now, I have to say, this isn't about attacking any creators. That's why I'm not stating any names or anything like that. It's not about starting any drama. It's really trying to put a spotlight so we can acknowledge that Dead by Daylight's biggest problem, while it being, perks are a massive problem, maps and other stuff like that, but it's selective outrage. I think that is another topic that a lot of people probably haven't discussed yet. Because a lot of these players don't want balance, they just want the balance that benefits them. Now, from my perspective as a high MMR P100 Ghostface main, a top 1% player at this point, I don't expect the survivors to play nice. I don't expect them to play fair, but I do expect them to play smart. And on the other side of things, I don't expect any killer players to handicap themselves either. And that's probably why a majority are playing the strongest killers they can. Right? So with that being said, like, I'm going to immediately think from that perspective as high level low tier main when talking about this stuff. And that's why I constantly try to bring that sort of perspective into the conversation, because as much as they want to see an like this perk because this S tier exists, or this map change because this S tier exists, we still need to keep in mind that the rest of the game is also important. Anybody who's not an A to S tier should be also taken into account as well. And even furthermore than that, Dead by Daylight could improve, at least the community, when we stop pretending that this is a morality test and start treating it like what it is, which is a competitive asymmetrical game. we can start getting some positive change that potentially could allow for the game to improve overall. So yes, the Dead by Daylight community has double standards. And yes, some big creators fence it to protect their platform, and it does not make them evil. It just, they're human, just like everybody else. But progress doesn't come from silence. It comes from the honest conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. And it's not about trying to pick a side. It's really just trying to stop pretending that the both sides are always equal. I want to know your thoughts in the comments section. Let me know what you think about the topic at hand. And consider supporting the channel by becoming a member on the Patreon or the YouTube. Or you could just hit the like button, comment or something. Hit that sub. And if you want to have your name read off at the end of every video, obviously become a member. There's one of the benefits, as well as a bunch of perks and cool content you haven't seen yet. I'll see you guys in the next one, and hopefully you enjoyed the gameplay. I wanted to go ahead and thank all my members from Patreon: Crow King 101, YouTube members: Majora Jeff, T.O.N. Dyer, Zero Mocker, Christian, Crow Vader, Noxus, Jack, Dole, a whip. Let's go. Twitch. We also have Cake, Danica, Final Girl Bunny, Zero Mocker, Ginsburg, Zaz, Crow, PB Head, Mr. Morg, and Dole as well. I appreciate all you guys for supporting, and I will see you guys. If you want to become a member, go ahead and join, and I will see you guys in the next one.